After Salvatore Maranzano's triumph in the Castello Maurice War in 1931, he founded 5 influential crime organizations in New York City, known as the Five Families. Maranzano restructured the Italian-American gangs in New York City into the now famous Bonanno, Colombo, Gambino, Genovese, and Lucchese families. Stay tuned as we investigate how the Five Families became the most powerful mafia group in the United States. The Castello Maurice War. It was in the 1920s that Giuseppe "Joe the Boss" Masseria ran the American Mafia. Don Vito Cascioferro dispatched Salvatore Maranzano to assume power in the Mafia. Charles "Lucky" Luciano, Albert "Mad Hatter" Anastasia, Vito Genovese, Alfred Mineo, Willie Moretti, and Joe the Bull Adonis were all members of Masseria's team. Luciano wanted to rid the mob of outdated traditions by bringing in new ideas and technology. As you must have already guessed, violence was one fundamental way the Mafia group asserted its dominance. We'll delve into more details on that shortly. After seeing that Masseria was losing the fight, Luciano decided to switch sides. Maranzano forged a deal with Luciano behind closed doors to kill Masseria so that he could take over as Maranzano's right-hand man and acquire access to Masseria's rackets. The Castello Maurice War was finally ended when Luciano betrayed Masseria and, with Maranzano's approval, took over Masseria's gang and became Maranzano's lieutenant. After Masseria's demise, Maranzano restructured the New York City Italian-American gangs into the Five Families, with Luciano, Pravacci, Gagliano, Mangano, and himself at the helm. In Wappingers Falls, New York, Maranzano conveyed a meaning of organized crime dons and proclaimed himself Capo di tutti I capo, or head of all heads, boss of all bosses. Maranzano also reduced the power of competitor families' rackets to strengthen their own. At first glance, Luciano seemed to embrace these alterations, but he was buying time to get rid of Maranzano. Even though Maranzano had been a little more forward-thinking than Masseria, Luciano had come to think that Maranzano was even more greedy and stuck in his ways than Masseria had been.
And I think you are good to go.
The Elimination of Luciano. Around September 1931, Maranzano decided Luciano posed a threat and recruited Irish thug Vincent Mad Dog Call to eliminate him. Instead, Lucchese informed Luciano that he was a target. Maranzano called Luciano, Genovese, and Costello into his office at 230 Park Avenue in Manhattan on September 10, 1931. Click the subscribe button if you enjoyed the video so that you can join our small exclusive community and be in the know about all the latest news and updates. Luciano, convinced that Maranzano was plotting their assassination, decided to strike first. He dispatched 4 Jewish gangsters Maranzano's staff wouldn't recognize to his office. 2 gangsters posing as government officers disarmed Maranzano's security team. With Lucchese's help, he was there to identify Maranzano. The other 2 stabbed the boss several times before shooting him. It was the first murder in the legendary Night of the Sicilian Vespers. In 1931, after Maranzano was murdered, Luciano summoned a meeting in Chicago and emphasized that each of the 5 families should handle their own business. Violence. The reputation for brutality is the source of the 5 families' power. It's been shown that the 5 families benefit significantly from and feed off their reputation for violence. Organized crime personalities have a reputation for being able to carry out threats of violence and obstruct the legal system when accusations are brought against them. Thus, actual violence is rarely necessary. Almost all of the people killed by the mob had some connection to one of the 5 families or their associates. Sammy Gravano testified against Gambino family boss John Gotti, claiming that murder is utilized to maintain order within the family.
Come on, let's get you started.
You can't be a powerful criminal if you're just doing one type of criminal activity. It looks like the 5 crime families took this quite too literally. They broadened their scope of operation across many illegal activities and made the name a mighty legion of criminals. More explanations later, so stick around. Support from state and city officials. The 5 families' heads have acted as intermediaries between businesses, politicians, and criminals who have had run-ins with unions, police, or government agencies. In certain underground economies, they helped maintain order when nothing else was doing so. Crime lords often bribe local officials to further their agendas. The 5 families paid off police in several cities to ignore their illegal gambling and other business dealings. Criminal kingpins also played a vital role in politics, providing financial backing and voter mobilization help for the candidates they liked. In exchange, the five families received immunity from arrest and prosecution by the political class. There was corruption in contract letting and real estate agreements, which benefited the five families. Broadening the scope of illegal activities. During the 1920s Prohibition era, the American Mafia, an Italian-American organized crime network with activities in cities across the United States, especially New York and Chicago, grew in power due to its success in the illicit liquor trade.
Well, that's good news.
In the early 20th century, families made the most of the labor struggles and the national alcohol ban that lasted from 1919 until 1933. The unions were able to construct employer cartels that rigged bids and fixed pricing and plundered pensions and welfare funds once they gained control of the labor movement. Urban tycoons were behind the rackets. The family also made money through extortion of protection fees from other black marketeers and through gambling, illegal substances, loan sharking, prostitution, and pornography. Law enforcement had primarily ignored them for decades. Corruption permeated the local police force. Over time, the FBI elevated the elimination of organized crime as its highest priority. Constant police harassment and changes in the economy and government caused much trouble for the five families. Since the disappearance of Jimmy Hoffa, there have been numerous efforts to get to the root behind it and bring the perpetrators to face the law. Although these have proven futile so far, there's still an obsession with Jimmy's disappearance. Why is that? That's all covered in our last video titled, Why Everybody is Interested About Jimmy Hoffa Disappearance.